Right now to help break down some of the really scary and dangerously liberal ideas we heard from Kamala Harris and Tim Walz just last night. I'm joined by Dr. Kevin Roberts. He's head of the Heritage Foundation. It's really good to see you.
Trish, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Well, this is important work, what you guys are doing right now. You get a new website out, aptly named Dangerously Liberal, dangerouslyliberal.com. So well said. Because I think that the word, like if we get into just the vocabulary aspect of this, right? The word liberal has always seemed like it has this positive connotation, but there's a dangerous element going on right now. And we're seeing it in terms of her economic policy, in terms of education. And I know you have a strong background in that, in terms of energy policy. All of this is bad and frankly dangerous for America.
It is. And, you know, I'll get to the motivation of putting this website together, but I've got to hang on this great point that you make, Trish, which is how the left co-ops language. They've taken this word liberal, which actually can be fine in a classical liberal sense, but in this modern American sense, especially as it relates to the vice president's policy record, it's awful. And so a few weeks ago, we were motivated to put this website together, which has gone live in the last few days, in order to inject more policy substance into this conversation. Why do we have to do that? Because these liberal policies are dangerous. They're dangerous to the American dream. They're dangerous to freedom. They're dangerous to prosperity. But secondly, as is evidenced by this interview that the vice president did last night, she's running away from her record. She's running away from that policy substance. It's the honest to God truth, even though Heritage, of course, is unabashedly conservative, that we want every voter, every American, whether they're liberal or conservative, to have the resources they need to understand the policies of this vice president. She's running away from it. It's not even on her campaign website. So we decided we would fill the gap.
It's amazing to me. I'm glad you brought that up. I mean, the campaign website, I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. I mean, how can you be running for the presidency of the United States of America and not even actually articulate your policies there? And you're right, she's running from things, and we're seeing this even in terms of fracking, right? Because apparently, suddenly, fracking matters. It matters when you get to Pennsylvania and you're talking about putting people out of work. Dr. Roberts, take a look at this one.
There's no question I'm in favor of banning fracking. You know, we have to just acknowledge that the residual impact of fracking is enormous in terms of the impact on the health and safety of communities. I think about this issue through the lens of my baby nieces, who are 1.5 and 3 years old. And when I look at those babies, and I think about what the world will be like in 20 years if we don't act, I'm really afraid. And as it relates to those Republicans in Congress, where I've now been for 2.5 years, every one of those members need to look at the babies, the grandbabies in their life, and then look in the mirror and ask themselves, why have they failed to act?
And in 2019, you said, quote, there is no question I'm in favor of banning fracking. Fracking, as you know, is a pretty big issue, particularly in your must-win state of Pennsylvania.
Sure.
Do you still want to ban fracking?
No, and I made that clear on the debate stage in 2020, that I would not ban fracking. As vice president, I did not ban fracking. As president, I will not ban fracking.
You know, she should have just gone with Shapiro, honestly. And then she would have had a better shot at Pennsylvania. Instead, she has to say, oh, okay, no, I'm not going to ban fracking. I'm not entirely sure what to believe when it comes to Kamala Harris. I think she's a political animal and a political animal only. So she doesn't have a lot of substance vis-a-vis the policy. But I'm pretty concerned because I think she does want to ban fracking. And I think she does want to take us in, frankly, not just socialist, but communist direction when it comes to our economy. And so I do think that this is all dangerously liberal, as you guys point out. What do you make of this flip-flop?
Well, two things. On the sort of political or messaging side, I mean, what an affront, what contempt for common sense of any of us, that she can say in the same breath, I mean, literally the same breath, Trish, in this interview last night, that she supports still the Green New Deal and she no longer wants to ban fracking. Those two things are mutually exclusive. You can't do that. But that aside, the substance is more important. And that's really what Americans care about, right? Because they might hear the word fracking, and given the demonizing that Biden and Harris have done of that term and that practice, people might think it's terrible. But what they don't realize is when you ban fracking, you basically cause inflation. You, especially in a place like Pennsylvania, you prevent the opportunity to have lower gas prices, lower grocery prices, lower electricity prices. As I have mentioned all this week, while the price of groceries and the price of gas, of course, are very high, even though the vice president says they aren't, the most important thing to pay attention to if you want to understand the impact of her policies with the Green New Deal and banning fracking is when you get your monthly electric bill. When people are paying their electric bill and it's 20, 30, 40% higher than it was 3.5 years ago when Vice President Harris took the oath of office, it is because of her policies. You simply can't trust her.
And they're all connected with one another. Energy as it relates to inflation, energy as it relates to national security. It seems to me that if you're actually going to plan to take Russia offline and get rid of all the natural gas that could possibly be on the market and say, okay, well, our allies are not allowed to buy that anymore. Okay, fine. You're making a strategic national security decision to do that. But would you really want to pull everything offline vis-a-vis the energy sources you have here in America at the exact same time and say, hey, we're going to go EV on everyone? It feels like the energy department's not talking to the econ department, which is not talking to the State Department. I mean, I'm just sort of like, does nobody talk to each other? Can't we work in conjunction here to actually have policies that will not destroy the livelihoods and the purchasing power of everyday Americans? Back to your point, Dr. Roberts, she actually basically said, I mean, it was a bizarre interview. Dana was not very tough on her. But in this one particular moment, she talked about how she's still committed to all her ideas, including the green energy thing. And I think she kind of let it slip. The Inflation Reduction Plan really wasn't about reducing inflation. How could it be, considering how much inflation went up? But it was actually about getting some pet projects through for some things they wanted. Here she is talking about inflation reduction and green energy.
Generally speaking, how should voters look at some of the changes that you've made, that you've explained some of here in your policy? Is it because you have more experience now and you've learned more about the information? Is it because you were running for president in a Democratic primary? And should they feel comfortable and confident that what you're saying now is going to be your policy moving forward?
Dana, I think the most important and most significant aspect of my policy perspective and decisions is my values have not changed. You mentioned the Green New Deal. I have always believed, and I have worked on it, that the climate crisis is real, that it is an urgent matter to which we should apply metrics that include holding ourselves to deadlines around time. We did that with the Inflation Reduction Act. We have set goals for the United States of America and by extension the globe around when we should meet certain standards for reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, as an example. That value has not changed. My value around what we need to do to secure our border, that value has not changed. I spent 2 terms as the Attorney General of California prosecuting transnational criminal organizations, violations of American laws regarding the illegal passage of guns, drugs, and human beings across our border. My values have not changed.
I'm kind of thinking they have, or they're whatever's most expedient in the moment, perhaps, Dr. Roberts. And this might be a case of, have your cake and eat it too. What's your take on what they did vis-a-vis the Inflation Reduction Act and their efforts to push a green energy agenda?
Well, there's a lot there, but I'll home in on your question because it's the most important consideration. It reveals what a Harris presidency would look like. In other words, when they were passing the so-called Inflation Reduction Act, we at Heritage, and I know you also were saying 2 things about it. Number 1, inflation will go up. That's exactly what happened. And number 2, this is a Trojan horse for their bigger agenda, the so-called Green New Deal, which not only will increase inflation, but it will do so much by introducing artificial incentives in the market that Americans, when they get their electric bills, when they go to the gas pumps, are going to feel the pain. To say nothing of the impact that has on national security, Trish. Keep in mind that in the last administration, by being energy independent, that wasn't good only for the economic prosperity of Americans. It was great for Americans and free people around the world because we didn't have to rely on totalitarians for our oil and gas supply. All of that to say, the vice president is trying to have her cake and eat it too. most people in the media, present company accepted, have allowed her to get away with that. And Dana Bash, even though a lot of her initial questions I thought were good, she asked not a single tough follow-up question that every politician, whether they're liberal or conservative or somewhere in between, must get so that the people can make a really sound decision.
Well, and I think that was deliberate. Look, I've worked in mainstream media my whole career, and I told the viewers this just yesterday. Credit to Fox, I was never told a particular area with a guest was off limits or to tone it down or anything like that. I did actually get a lot of that elsewhere, specifically at Bloomberg for some reason, which is just an interesting little data point. I was always in the doghouse because of things I'd stir up with some of the Obama economic people. But it tells me that, whether it be Harris and her campaign or whether it's the Obama people that are behind the scenes or the people in the Biden administration, there is some kind of pathway through to the anchor herself who's not really challenging Harris. So it was kind of a puff piece. It was a neither here nor there kind of interview, but it gives you a little insight into the lack of discipline from these journalists, these so-called journalists today. And, they've got them basically on speed dial. I think CNN had a big hand in taking Biden out, and they're having a big hand in trying to put Kamala in. And Americans need to understand that. Dangerously liberal, again, the website itself, it's important for people to go to. I'm quite alarmed that there's this attitude among some youth and not just youth, but a lot of people that are like, okay, well, it's not Biden, so we can go with Kamala. Ben Stiller, the actor, was caught on this candid camera this week, and they say, who are you going to vote for? And he said Kamala because we need change. And I'm like, change? It's more of the same and worse. I mean, she wants to give out $25,000 for every new first-time home buyer. What is the easiest way to jack up home prices, inflate them some more by $25,000 each, give out free money, these handouts? It's like this woman really and truly doesn't get it. She wants to buy votes.
She does. And you think about this new home buyer credit that she has mentioned. You think about the student loan bailout, which doesn't help anybody for people who didn't go to college, who decided that they needed to earn a living and not go to college. They're the ones on whose backs the student loan bailout is being paid. This is just simple economics. And you think about Ben Stiller's ridiculous comment. Just put the politics off to the side. I mean, in other words, who cares if he's politically liberal? Just the comment that he wants to have change, and she is one of the architects of what has happened the last 3.5 years. It really shows the absurdity of so much political analysis out there, and this is why we wanted to put the website together, Trish, as you have said so eloquently. It's imperative, wherever someone is on the political spectrum, that they get the resources on policy, substance, and issues and ideas so they can make an informed decision. The vice president doesn't want anyone doing that, because her policy record has undermined the American dream.
But we made this mistake before as a nation. I don't say me, you personally, but look, America made this mistake in 2020. It was like, okay, this feels good, and there's no mean tweets, and we don't really know what Biden's policy is or whether he's going to be able to fix anything, but it feels good to vote for Biden. We paid the price.
And now I want to hand it over to the president of Ukraine, who has as much courage as he has determination. Ladies and gentlemen, President Putin. President Putin. He's going to beat President Putin. President Zelensky.
I mean, I'm just kind of a policy dork. So, I'm the one who sits there and reads everyone's tax policy cover to cover. And I don't like the idea of corporate taxes going up. I don't like the idea of individual income taxes going up. I think that all of this would be a drain on the economy, while simultaneously she wants to print money and hand it out to whoever she thinks is most deserving of it. I mean, what does that really tell you in the classical sense? Are we bordering on socialism? Are we bordering on communism? I mean, again, when you combine what we learned from Meta this week, the Facebook CEO coming out and saying, hey, the FBI pressured us into censoring information, that's under Harris's watch. That's the Biden-Harris administration. I'm starting to get nervous.
Well, you should. And look, Heritage well enough to know that we don't engage in hyperbole. So when I say that I agree with you that we are bordering or on the verge of socialism for sure, I really mean that. I mean, our economic scholars at Heritage, our public policy scholars at Heritage would tell you that that's what we've been living through. That's what the Inflation Reduction Act and what the Green New Deal actually are. They are socialism. And then when you think about what the Biden-Harris regime has done with free speech, to the point that you mentioned regarding the Meta example, that actually gets into a totalitarian version of socialism, communism, in other words, that's here. There is no doubt in my mind, just speaking purely as a policy leader, not getting into partisan endorsements, which I can't do, that if the vice president succeeds in becoming president of the United States, this republic's history as a capitalist engine, as a place for entrepreneurialism, but also as a haven for people who love freedom, free speech most of all, might be coming to an end.
Which is why, indeed, she is dangerously liberal. I encourage everybody to go to dangerouslyliberal.com today. Get the facts, spread the word, tell your friends, because this is one of those do or die times. Dr. Kevin Roberts, president of the Heritage Foundation, thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks for having me. Really enjoyed the conversation.